I find that it's really important to take great care of your collectibles. Let's make some art. Many of you will recognize this guy as Atlas from the Portal 2 co-op campaign. Now, I'm a huge Portal fan and I've had this guy for over a decade, and it's been broken for over a decade. It was a pretty cheap thing, not very well made, so I wasn't particularly surprised when that happened. I put him in a drawer and said, I'll fix that later. Later never came and he continued to disintegrate. So now it's time to finally put him to some use. Atlas, along with the limbs he tragically lost along the years, is just in general more unstable than your gran after one too many triple Baileys at Christmas, so he never really had much of a chance. Somehow it does still light up after all these years, which is kind of sad really. But to give him a new lease of life, we need to start bending and snapping him up, like those chiropractors on TikTok who fling some poor lad's legs above his head like a contortionist's wet dream, all while sounding like they're elbow-dropping iceberg lettuces off camera. This is actually a fitting end for Atlas because, for those not familiar with the games, in the co-op campaign where you play as him and Peabody, GLaDOS explodes them both at the end of each chapter. So that's going to be the basis of the story we're telling. I didn't want to make an exact recreation of any one part of either game, but I'm mostly recreating something along the lines of this room from the first game, but a bit more degraded, like how the facility is in the sequel, and with a couple of our favourite set pieces for good measure. So to start our diorama proper, we need a base. This is just 3 squares of plywood glued together. To give us a raised platform, I cut out a couple of pieces of foam core and glued those on too. Most of the interior of Portal is made up of panelled walls and floors, so ours will be no different. I'm cutting these out of mat board, and as a tip, you will need to have a nice sharp blade for this, because if it's dull whatsoever, you'll feel like you're trying to cut through a Ford Fiesta with a slice of ham. I decided on a scale that roughly matched up with the Atlas figure, and bearing in mind my forever motto of scale is only a suggestion, I do mean it when I say roughly. I pretty much just loaded into the game, viewed things with my eyeballs, and decided what looked best. From there, I measured out smaller squares for the floor and various wall panels to fit. I sliced into some of the panels because we are trying to recreate the Aperture Science era in Portal 2, where things are pretty run down and broken, so I wanted some of them to be cracked and missing parts. Then I spread on a good layer of tacky glue and started sticking them down. I even made a concerted effort to actually finish the outside of the diorama this time. I have been guilty of not putting quite so much effort into the unseen side of things in the past, but no more. It's getting done. This time, at least. I make no promises for future Lex that she cannot fulfill on my behalf. I primed everything with the old staple paint and Mod Podge mix and left that to dry. While we wait, it was time to get some set pieces on the boil. Now, I don't usually use a lot of 3D printing in my dioramas, basically none to be honest, but I thought, why not? I could have made these from scratch in probably less time than the printing and filler priming and sanding and priming and sanding again, but I wanted to give it a bash. I chose 2 main models to print, firstly a 1500 megawatt Aperture Science heavy duty super colliding super button. Yes, that is the actual name. And of course, it wouldn't be Portal without a weighted companion cube. The love all of us Portal mega fans feel for this thing is probably something that should be studied in a clinical environment. It probably says something that the cube that Chell, and yes, it's Chell, don't argue with me about pronunciation in the comments, but the cube Chell is basically mind-mongered into getting attached to by GLaDOS, and that Doug Ratman has fallen in love with. We've all fallen for just the same. Maybe not just the same. That is worrying, isn't it? Oh well. I painted them up to match the game as best I could, and gave everything a good dry brush to bring out the texture, and some washes to show shadows and also dirty up the button just a little. I elected not to dirty up the cube though, as I do feel that old Ratman would probably be popping in from time to time to polish her up. And if anyone's wondering why I'm using a Portal 1 companion cube and a Portal 2 character diorama, I just prefer the original. I'm sure most of us do. It's the one we all fell in love with. At the end of the day, it's all canon, isn't it? It's the same facility, just years down the line. So all of that stuff, the cube, the Ratman drawings, they would all still be there. especially if you've played all the way through the games. No spoilers, but, you know. I do actually have a Portal 2 companion cube in the exact right dimensions that I need. This came with a different figure, but I wanted the original, especially because it would be a bit of a betrayal. Yep, it's the original that is within my being for the rest of time, so let's stick with that. I used a printout of the cube symbol that I painted over with the same teal paint as the light strips and stuck that in first. I was very impressed that even with layers of primer and paint, this thing fit together really well. It made me inordinately pleased to have this button made. It just tickles that part of my brain that usually only responds to cups of tea and bubblegum flavour ice cream, because I'm 8 years old inside. Maybe I am to the 1500 megawatt aperture science heavy duty super colliding super button, as Doug Ratman is to the companion cube. Tearing my eyes away momentarily from my love, my life, the 1500 megawatt, you get the bit by now, the bloody button, okay? I headed back over to our room. The wall panels in the testing chambers do have a slight texture to them, so in order to create that I used a sponge to stipple my first layer of paint on. Now you could use a special artist's sponge for this, which will probably cost you about $4,000 and the promise of your firstborn child, but a kitchen sponge does just as well for this kind of light texture. Just don't blame me if you keep doing your dishes with it and end up with a mouth like a landlord's hallway the next time you have dinner. I gave it a fairly heavy black wash and wiped away some excess while encouraging it to pool around the edges and in cracks. This helps us with the derelict look we're going for. I wanted some of the dark spots to look like damp and water damage, so I went back in a few more times to weather those more. I want this to look like an old room that she dismantled poor dear Atlas in, and maybe the parts were just a little bit of a hassle to recover, so they were left here to rot. I'm sure she's got a few spares kicking about. This one is actually a little bit different for me. Usually I have maybe not so much a rule as I'm breaking it, but a strong preference not to include characters in my dioramas, and Atlas is technically a character. For me, when I make a diorama, I'm usually trying to tell a story or build a world based on the setting, the decoration, the dressing, the props, all of those things, and sometimes putting a character in the middle of it, that's what draws your eye, and it kind of takes away from everything else. Whereas all the other things are what I'm really into. I actually originally wanted to be a prop maker and in the art department on films. That's what I trained in, I guess. And that absolutely carries over into my love of video games. And so many of my favorite games also happen to have great settings and great set dressing and great props and just all of that good stuff. I could talk for hours and hours and hours, and no one would care or find it remotely interesting about this stuff, so I won't, I promise. I won't put you through that, but yeah, I love it. Okay, I'm gonna stop going on about set design in video games. It is just a huge passion of mine, clearly, and maybe if I wasn't such a Luddite and worse with technology than your gran trying to order an AI Jesus statue from Temu, then maybe I would be making them in the actual video games. But alas, I cannot. So we're going to take all of our favorite set design elements from Portal and we are going to smash as many of them as I can get into this little diorama. That's the idea. So now that I've bored you to death with my yammering on about the world building, it's time to implement my favourite part of the Portal set design, the Ratman drawings and pictures. I printed these out and I'm sticking them down with some watered down matte Mod Podge. I didn't place these exactly as they are in the game. Again, I wanted this to be my own interpretation, and really I'm just trying to evoke the vibes of the games. Not to mention, I'm sure in such a massive facility, our good pal Dougie had a number of rooms to hide out in and while away the hours looking at these very lovely artworks and doing only very appropriate activities. Look, I'm sure it gets lonely when a rogue AI deadly neurotoxins all your mates and traps you in your place of employment. I'm starting to regret that earlier comparison I made between us. I decided to use just the Portal 1 pictures for the main part of the diorama, but I do also really bloody love the art in Portal 2, so I used some of those for the back. Since these are much bigger, I cut them to fit the panel sizes and will disguise some of those edges with other pictures and drawings. This one of Chell is a particular favourite of mine. So it's time to do some drawing, and really the Ratman drawings are part of the reason I've put this project off for so long. I'm just not very confident in my drawing ability. put pants at it, to be honest, and that's fine. I haven't put enough hours in to get better. My hands are a bit shaky, and it's just not one of the things that I'm the most talented at. It's all fine. But the Ratman drawings and Portal are probably very evidently from the rest of this video something I'm super passionate about and that I really love and mean a lot to me, so I just didn't want to make an arse of them, to be honest. But we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to put things off. We're going to be nice to ourselves about our abilities, and we are going to do it. I got some Posca pens specifically for this. It's going to be much easier than using a paintbrush. Not sponsored. If you'd like to, you won't probably after you see what I produce with them. We're not doing that. We just said we're going to be nice about ourselves. Pens. Anyway, also to help me in my quest for mediocrity, I printed off some reference images. These are just straight rips from the game textures of the walls of the different Ratman drawings. These are all the kind of main ones in the main room that I will show you some footage of, and they kind of give us everything we need, and it's kind of at the right scale. So I'm going to try and sort of basically copy these. If you're wanting to make something similar, top tip, these are really good. You could just cut them down the middle and use these as your panels. They are not 3D though, and I wanted to make my own interpretation, so I'm not doing that. But if you wanted to, game files are great for dioramas. I really could have used these as the panels since I accidentally printed them off at the perfect size. I began with the black paint pen and some tally marks, which seemed like the hardest thing to get wrong. Once I felt a bit more confident, I moved on to the most important one of all, because why the hell not? I wanted this biblically accurate angelic cube to be front and center of the wall and a focus of the piece. I just really like it, and it's actually the main part of my Ratman drawing tattoo, so I tried my best to make it at least vaguely accurate. I do draw a bit, despite my lack of confidence in it, and I do have a bit of a scribbly kind of style that actually fits in fairly well with these, so I think I managed to make things at least semi-recognisable. I will say, not to break the fourth wall here, but drawing whilst angling your hand around a camera like you're trying to tickle a badger around a U-bend is not really conducive to groundbreaking artistic brilliance, but I do what I must for you all. Of course, we had to make sure the classic "the cake is a lie" was included. What a time on the internet that was. I remember it vividly. YouTube comments were a war zone of just that one phrase for weeks. Once most of the black was done, I grabbed the red pen and filled in the gaps with some other choice prose. This was the point in the build where the vision was really coming together, even though I realised that Posca's true red was actually a bit more of a true pinkish red. Sometimes you just have to accept fate and take the L. I'm fairly used to that, being a Valve Games fan who's been waiting for a third installment in any of my favourite game franchises since, I don't know, roughly the 10th of October 2007? Just as a vague estimate. The torture we sustain at the hands of Gabe Newell is absolutely untold. Once everything was finished, I don't think the colour difference was too noticeable, but we'll get to that. It's been a while since we've seen poor Atlas. We ripped him to bits and left him on the side of the road, like the chest of drawers your mum found your magazine collection in and decided had to be banished from the house ASAP. Magazines! What year is it in my head? Do they even still sell those in shops? Don't answer that in the comments. We'll leave it in. He's already the right colours for the most part, so a nice wash of black and brown paints to dirty him up is enough to sell the story that he's been left here for a long time. This kind of plastic isn't good for painting on usually, the washes bead up on it, but I actually find that to be a bit of a good thing for dirt and water damage. I even managed to find the Aperture Science handheld portal device that he came with, which got the same treatment. If you're enjoying the video, please consider subscribing to my channel or even checking out my Patreon in the description. All the support means I can keep spending time making things like this. I do have some dioramas in mind we're going to get to very shortly, but if you'd like to leave a comment with what video game you'd like to see made IRL, I would love to see it too. On to some finishing touches. One of my biggest crafting tips is to do this as your final step. When you've done any kind of painting, a lot of the time the details, dry brush, whatever it is, looks like it's just sitting on top of the surface, because it is. But we want things to blend in a bit more, especially here it looks a bit too fresh considering we're weathering things to look older. So I always recommend doing a super light black wash, and I mean so light you can hardly tell there's anything there. You want it more watered down than the drinks you get at a dodgy bar, served to you by Handsy Pete who's stuck his fingers in every drink he's poured since 1987. Barely noticeable. This ties everything in together without covering up any of your details. I used some CA glue on the button, well I tried to anyway. This is my review of Hang Tough super glue from whatever pound shop level of hell I found it in. It's shite. After the fourth tube I opened was actually still a liquid, the packaging leaked and got all over my fingers and a bit of the diorama. 11 out of 10. For the rest of the parts, I actually decided not to glue them down, which is usually another big no-no for me. I do like to think of my dioramas as tableaus, frozen moments in time, and I don't like things moving, so I usually fix everything in place. Maybe it was my lack of confidence in having a character in there, or wanting to be able to move things around and tell a different story in the future, or quite probably my lack of willingness to spend another 20 minutes peeling CA glue off my fingers. But I guess I can always come back and stick them down if I want to, and maybe it'll be nice to have some freedom to change it up. So here we are, all finished. I'm really happy with how it came out. I think we nailed the vibes from the game, and it's going to be a nice little display piece for my shelf. I'm definitely also making myself another button because that came out so good. Stick around for that in the background of the shot, I guess. Anyway, thank you so much for sticking around for the video. Please like and subscribe and check out the Patreon and all that jazz, and I'll catch you after.